Time for convening has arrived. I want to welcome everyone here tonight. And we will start. We have a couple items on a work session. So we'll start with the overview of the Roberts Drive Side Path Scoping Study by Mr. Martin.
Mayor and Council, good evening. For a few years now, the city's considered what to do about potentially developing a side path on Roberts Drive. Those plans have included the Bicycle Pedestrian Trail Plan in 2014, the Trails Master Plan in 2019, our Transportation Master Plan as recently as 2021, and the Sidewalk Master Plan and its update in 2024. In the T-SPLOST 2021 budget, we did allocate design funds for what we'll call Tier 2 side path and sidewalk projects that were proposed. Tier 2 being those projects that we likely wouldn't expect to receive funding for construction, but at least in Tier 1, where we do have funds, we wanted to propose some initial design work and studies to advance those projects outlined in Tier 2 and in anticipation of maybe future support for those projects. This Roberts Drive side path was among those Tier 1 design projects, and with that Tier 1 design allocation, we've conducted a scoping study. I'd like to ask Koseo, our project manager, to give you an update on that scoping study tonight, as well as Ko will discuss alignments for the side path proposed, projected cost estimates for the side path as proposed or as studied, and as well, she'll also discuss a phasing concept for you, a phase 1 and a phase 2 for the project. So with that, Ko, if you could please, ma'am.
Good evening. As Marty has mentioned.
Can you pull the microphone down just a little bit?
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So if we can go to the next slide, please. As Marty has mentioned, this is the scoping study is funded by T-SPLOST 2021, and the purpose of the scoping study is to determine the best alignment and project feasibility and cost estimate for side path on Roberts Drive. And we are presenting this to hopefully have this scoping study published on the city website. So next slide, please. So design goal for this project is to increase the access to the nearby park on Roberts Drive, the Chattahoochee River National Recreation Area, and also it would also fill gaps for the pedestrian access. There's some sidewalk on Roberts Drive, but it's not continuous, and there's very limited area for bicycle access. And it would also reduce the vehicles traveling on Roberts Drive, hopefully improve some air quality. There's some design constraints within the project limits. There are two streams. They're mostly on the north side of Roberts Drive. And then there's also a historic place home. It's Isaac Roberts' house. It's also located on the north side near Roswell Road and Roberts Drive. And there's also an entrenchment, civil war entrenchment on the property just east of Roberts Drive. So with these design goals and constraints, we have the study is recommending two phases, one starting at Dunwoody Place. So if we could go to the next slide, I could show you a little more. So that cyan blue line, starting from Dunwoody Place, Roberts Drive, the study is proposing a side path on the outside of Roberts Drive, and it will continue on and make the connection to the existing or the new side path constructed by GDOT. They're currently in construction but almost completed. The Roberts Drive Bridge, as you can see, and then it will pick up on the other side of the bridge and continue on to just past the entrance to the national park. And the phase one will include 3 mid-block crossings, one just at west of 400 Bridge that will provide pedestrian access from the sidewalk and to the side path on Roberts Drive. And then it will also, there's another mid-block crossing just north of the park entrance that will also provide the access from the existing sidewalk to the new Roberts Drive side path. And then finally, mid-block crossing will end at in the phase one that will also provide the final connection from the existing sidewalk to the side path. And phase two will pick up where phase one ended, and it will start the side path on the inside of Roberts Drive. The reason being is because of the entrenchment area on the park side. It will avoid that and also avoid any limit the grading within the park, and it will connect to the proposed side path under 400 Bridge that will be built as part of the 400 Express Lane Phase 2. That's in proposal. There are 2 proposals out there GDOT is reviewing. And then once we cross under 400 Bridge, there's a mid-block crossing to get us back to the outside of Roberts Drive, and it will continue to Roswell Road. If we go to the next slide, we could go a little more in detail, and that is the cost estimate of Phase 1 and Phase 2. The reason why there's such a difference in Phase 1 and Phase 2, the project alignment is for Phase 2 is almost as twice as Phase 1, and there's also more retaining walls in Phase 2, and right-of-way requirements are higher in Phase 2 as well. Okay, so next slide. We'll go a little more in details for for the study. So as mentioned, Phase 1 starts at Dunwoody Place on Roberts Drive. It will provide a plaza at the corner of Dunwoody Place and Roberts Drive, and it limits the disturbance to the existing commercial building and commercial parking lot. So the side path is reduced to 10 feet from 12, but it still provides that access for bicycles. And then it continues to the east, and it meets the side path that has been constructed by the Georgia 400 Bridge team. So if we go to the next slide, you can see, I don't know if you can see from here, but there's a dash line that shows the limit of work that was completed by the Georgia 400 team, and that's the side path on the south side, Roberts Drive, and this study is connecting to that side path. And then once we cross over the bridge, we are picking up that side path just east of that and continue on to the park. Next slide, please. So there's a mid-block crossing just east of the park entrance that will provide that connection from the residents on the other side and also the sidewalk, existing sidewalk, to the side path. So next slide, please. So again, the side path continues. There's some landscape buffer with 12-foot trees, and it ends with that mid-block crossing that will provide that, again, connection from the side path to the existing sidewalk. So that way, people on the other side doesn't have to walk all the way down to the park entrance or vice versa, and they can cross over to the side path. So next, Phase 2 will begin. If you can go to the next slide, please. So it picks up where Phase 1 ended, and once we cross over with the mid-block crossing, we have the ability to cross over to the inside of Roberts Drive, and the reason why, again, is to avoid that Civil War entrenchment area, and also to take advantage of the development that is proposed to occur just on the inside of Roberts Drive, just south of Roberts Drive Bridge, east of 400. I don't know if you can see that, but yes. So we will have a gap for the development to construct that side path, and for 400 team to finish the new bridge with the new side path under the bridge. And then if we can go to the next slide. So there's another mid-block crossing to give that to cross over to the north side of Roberts Drive. And then we'll just continue on from there to Roswell Road. There are two streams on this side of 400 Bridge, and we are crossing over the two streams with some boardwalk. If you could go to the next page or next slide, you can see a cross-section and rendering that shows that boardwalk. Next slide, please. And there's a Robert Isaac house just in that, I don't know if you can, just in the middle of that plan. And the remaining portion of that project is to be designed and constructed by Roswell Road North project. So the scoping study will make that connection. It's proposed to make that connection to the side path constructed by the Roswell Road North project. That is all.
All right, Mayor and Council, with Co's presentation, don't go away, please. So if you have any questions, we'd be glad to entertain those at this time. This lays out a plan for the entirety of the side path and gives you suggested on a potential phasing for the project as we move along with it, when we might choose to initiate design on either phase. And we take advantage along the way, as Co pointed out, of the work GDOT has recently completed with the Roberts Drive Bridge replacement as a priority in trying to get access to the national recreation area here. So with that, any questions of Co?
Any questions from council? All right, Co, Marty, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Co.
Right, moving to the next item, don't go too far, is the pavement condition index analysis. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, this is that third year that we talk about every so often in the paving program, where we have gone out, and we being a collective with a lot of help from a friend, and assessed our roadways across the city and conducted a roadway pavement condition assessment. So with that, I'd like to ask Trevor, if you could, please come up, sir. Mr. Trevor Triffo, who will walk you through what he found, his assessment, and a paving plan recommendation for the city for the next 3 years and beyond with that. But with that, so.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council. Is that better?
Yeah.
I'm a couple inches taller than the previous speaker. Mr. Mayor, members of council, it's a privilege to be able to speak with you today. I want to talk to you a little bit about our pavement evaluation study and the major findings that came out of that. I'll see if I can work this thing. So I'd like to start by saying that the city maintains about 302 centerline miles of paved roads. And that's a very valuable asset that the city owns and maintains. It has a replacement cost of at least $500 million, so it's a huge investment. And that investment needs to be properly managed and maintained. And you know, in order to preserve the city's investment and to provide a desirable level of service to the taxpayers. So proper management requires ongoing maintenance and rehabilitation of the road network. It also requires periodic assessment of the condition of the road network. So we get a health report card on the condition of the roads. So that's where we come in. Our company, MDS Technologies, was hired in the fall of 2023, and we had several objectives with our project. We wanted to update the city's pavement management system. So this is basically a database that defines all of the roads in the city's road network. Each individual block is a separate segment or a separate entity in that database. And then there's a software package that attaches to the database that allows us to track inspection information, track work history, and it has some budgeting tools that allow us to estimate the effect that applying any particular budget might have on the overall condition of the road network going forward. So that's what the pavement management system is. Part of the project is just kind of confirming and updating the road network if there were any new segments added since the last time we did the work. So we did that. And then we assessed the condition of the road network in a systematic and scientific way. And I'll get more into that in the next slide. We also created a 3-year rehabilitation program based on pavement condition. And we also ran some analysis to estimate the budget required to maintain the road network at a desirable level. So on this slide, this is the result of our pavement condition assessment. It's important to note, we used a standardized non-proprietary method to evaluate pavement condition. In the engineering world, a lot of tests are standardized, and there's an agency called ASTM, which is the American Society of Testing and Materials, that creates a standard that we use to evaluate the roads in this case. It's called ASTM D6433. So what it involves is the evaluation of 20 different kinds of problems or distresses that happen on roads. So we identify the type of the problem, the severity of the problem, and the extent of the problem on each of the individual road segments in the city. And we combine that information to calculate what's called a pavement condition index, or PCI. And the PCI varies on a scale from 0 to 100. 100 represents a perfect road, brand new. 0 is the other end of the scale where things are, not very good. And in between that, there are some ranges. And those ranges you can see on the map. For example, 85 to 100 is good. Those roads are dark green. 70 to 85 is satisfactory. Those are light green, and so on down the list until you get down to the bottom. And those roads are in purple or red or orange. So this map represents the PCI, Pavement Condition Index score, for each road segment in the city. We can take that information and roll that up into this summary chart that you can see on this slide. So as of October 2023, when we did the evaluation, 45.6% of the roads are in the good category, which is PCI 85 to 100, and then so on down the list. 23.4 satisfactory, 22.1% fair, 7.7 poor, and a very small number very poor or worse than that. So overall, only 8.9% of the city's roads we consider to be in poor or worse condition, and 69% are in good or satisfactory condition. And the overall average PCI for the whole road network is 80.4, which puts it in the high end of the satisfactory condition. We also did this evaluation in 2020, so we're in a position to compare apples to apples the condition of the road network then versus now. The condition has increased slightly from 79.8 in 2020 to 80.4 in 2023. And this is probably the result of the, increased and sustained level of funding that's been put into rehabilitating the road network over that period of time. So what happens with this distribution? You can think of the roads as wanting to move from right to left on the graph. So a road gets built, it starts out in the dark green category. After a while, though, it'll move to the light green category, the gold category, and so on. So they're constantly wanting to move from right to left. So as roads are fixed, they get plucked off of the left-hand side of the chart, poor, fair, etc., and they get put back into the good category, and it constantly circles around like that. But overall, there's been an increase in the condition of the road network over the last 3 years. So, the PCI is a scale from 0 to 100, but I thought it might be a good idea to show a few pictures that show what a typical road would look like in each of those categories. So here's a picture on Riverside Trace. This road is basically brand new, no distresses at all, PCI score of 100. So that's typical of what you would find in that 85 to 100 category. This piece of road on Mount Vernon Highway this is an example of a satisfactory road, PCI from 70 to 85. You can see that there's some cracking developing in front of the vehicle. There's also some cracking on the other side of the road. And these different types of cracking mean different things, and they're weighted differently in the PCI model. This road is still in quite good condition. Now here's an example, Karen Drive, of a road that's in fair condition. So you can see that the cracking is more developed here. There's a type of cracking called alligator cracking that occurs in the wheel paths when a car drives over a road and the cars and trucks go over it repeatedly. They tend to move in the same spot. And over time, the road can weaken, and a certain type of cracking called alligator cracking occurs in those places. And you can see an example of that on the left-hand side of the vehicle, where the crack pattern actually looks like the skin of an alligator. Here's a road in the poor range. It has a PCI of about 50, and the problem with this road is there's some of that alligator cracking I was just describing right in front of the vehicle, but it's getting to be more of a moderate type of category as opposed to the previous slide, which was slight. Now it gets a little more interesting with this slide. This is Mount Vernon Highway between Roswell Road and Johnson Ferry Road, so that's just around the corner from here. This road has got a lot of distress on it. It's patched, it's got alligator cracking along the curb line, it's got other types of cracking on the left-hand side towards the construction area. So this road is considered to be in very poor condition with a PCI between 25 and 40. And I think the reason this road, typically the city would address a road in this condition, but because the park was being constructed nearby, and my understanding is there's a lot of work going on with underground utilities, realignment of the road, etc. It doesn't really make sense to rehabilitate this road now until all of that other work is done. So I imagine at that point, it will be addressed. Here's a piece of Hammond Drive, PCI 10 to 25, serious condition. And this is an example of some high severity alligator cracking. So this is an isolated area. If you were to continue driving in the direction of the vehicle down Hammond Drive, the rest of the road is in excellent condition. But for whatever reason, this little piece, there's a localized failure. And this, crack pattern developed there. And so is something that eventually needs to be addressed. And the last category, Island Ferry Road, PCI of 10, 0 to 10 considered failed. So you can see that, there's not even much asphalt on this road. Again, I think the reason that this road hasn't been fixed in the past is there are very few people who live on this road. My understanding is they don't really want it paved. So, it's not something that's been at the top of the list. But for illustration purposes, it's an example of what a road in that category looks like. Okay, so that's the pavement condition index and how it varies from 100 to 0. Here's a slide that shows the deterioration of a typical pavement. So the line with the red dots represents a deterioration curve for a road. So when it's first built at time equals 0, the PCI is 100. And it deteriorates, over time, and eventually the deterioration rate accelerates, and it moves from the area that's marked as surface treatment into the mill and overlay category, and then eventually it may need to be reconstructed. So different types of treatments can be performed on roads at different points in its life cycle. This is the point I'm trying to make with this slide. So early on, surface treatments might be considered. So that might be things like crack sealing, or different types of coatings could potentially be applied to extend the life of a road. Historically, though, the city has sort of operated in the mill and overlay area, where roads deteriorate down, below the PCI 65 sort of level. And then there's a mill and overlay activity performed to bring the road back up to 100. Very few roads here are allowed to deteriorate down to the point where they need to be reconstructed. So this slide kind of expands on that a little bit. I know it looks a little busy, but I'll simplify it for us. Again, we have our pavement deterioration curve that at age 0 starts up at PCI 100 or excellent. And then, life is pretty good for a while. It doesn't deteriorate all that quickly. But as time goes on, the deterioration rate picks up faster and faster. And eventually, when it gets to be a PCI of about 50, the deterioration rate really picks up steam and the quality of the road drops off. So the idea of pavement management is that if we look at the top of that curve, there are different types of surface treatments that could be applied that might extend the life of the road out at a lower cost than waiting for it to deteriorate further and do a mill and overlay. But, you have to be careful about that because there are lots of different options. Some of them are appropriate for one case and not for another case. Sometimes people don't like the surface of the road that comes out of it. So it's something that the city could consider, but they should, proceed cautiously on that. Crack sealing is another option at that level. And then finally, we did some budget analysis to determine, what the effect of different budgets might be on the overall condition of the network looking forward out 10 years. So what this graph shows, on the y-axis is the average PCI of the whole road network. Okay, so all the PCIs of all the individual segments rolled into one number, and how that varies over time for different budget levels. So the green line is sort of the worst case scenario where no money is being spent. And obviously that's not recommended, but it just sort of forms the lower boundary for how the network would perform if that were the case. So you can see that the PCI goes from 80, and then in 10 years it goes down to less than 50. So it drops off very significantly if the city were to decide not to spend any money on road rehabilitation. So Again, that's not recommended, and I don't think is very realistic, but it forms the lower boundary. Up near the top, we ran the analysis for 8 million, 7 million, and 6 million per year. And all of this is in current dollars. It's hard to predict, where prices for construction materials, et cetera, are going to go even next year, let alone 10 years out. So we conduct the analysis in current dollars. And what it shows is, if you look at the orange line, which is 7 million a year, that's approximately the amount of money that's required to maintain the road network in its current condition. 6 million leads to a bit of a drop-off, and 8 million increases it up, after 10 years pretty significantly. But 7 is about what's required to maintain the road network where it is now. This is the final slide. The only thing I want to reiterate is it's very important to continue to monitor the health of the road network. So every 3 years, the city should continue to have it reevaluated and redo the study so that, going forward, you have the data points that you need to understand how the road network behaves.
Trevor, I apologize. I short-slided you one slide. Mayor and Council, we did take the opportunity to digest Trevor's PCI report, and in front of you is the 3-year rehabilitation plan based on the $7 million per year investment level discussed in the budget development. Sorry, Trevor.
Yeah.
We had one slide we owed you. And it also defines an approximate centerline mileage for each of those fiscal years as a part of that average $7 million investment per year in the paving program. So did want to add that as well. So
Right, and the only other thing I guess I could add is we created this program. It's driven by the PCI score. So, you tend to try to fix the worst roads first. But we did sort of massage things so that it wasn't done on a block-by-block basis. We tried to create a lengthy corridor so that, several blocks of road would be done at one time to create a nice, sort of smooth corridor for folks who are using that road.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Paulson?
Thank you. I guess a couple questions. Marty, we've got a number of projects underway that are going to have final paving as part of their finished project, like Mount Vernon, going down this way, Johnson Ferry, et cetera. How did you treat those streets in this analysis? Because they would weigh down our average, but we know they're going to get fixed as part of the construction project that's underway already. How did you take those into account here? Because it's unfair to penalize the system with those, because we know they're getting fixed automatically from the project that's already there.
Right. In some cases where we, Trevor, if I could, in some cases where we knew that the fix was coming, we've effectively ruled it out of the 3-year rehabilitation plan.
Okay.
So while Trevor may have scored the pavement, as an objective, here's where it resides today, it didn't necessarily end up in the paving plan if it's already being addressed by some other means.
So you did that? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Rochelle?
Okay, so we talked about maintaining an 8.0 index, and so is that an average? Because I heard you say that at 76.4, the road is still in good condition. So are we paving roads that are still in good condition, or is that an average? Like, when do we start to pave the road? At what point? Index.
It's an average score. So 80 is the target overall. But there are still plenty of roads that have a much lower score. So I think the idea is that the city fixes those roads that have a lower score and changes that PCI score to 100, and that brings the overall average up. But the city is not paving roads that have a 76 or 80 score itself, if that makes sense.
the important thing, as Trevor explained a couple of minutes ago with that, for instance, the no investment paving model. The whole while, sorry again. The whole while we're making decisions to pave a degraded roadway here, per that aging model that you saw that Trevor presented just a few moments ago. Other pavements in the city are degrading over time as well. So those scores are lessening. So from the day he did this score, some pavement conditions across the city have gone down since then, just by virtue of age and deterioration of the pavement. So while we're making those repairs here, the stock is as well aging over time and degrading in average. So that 80 target average is still the number we strive for with the paving plan here.
Right, so if I could just add one thing. If you look at this slide, so this shows a distribution of all the PCIs for the city. So there are roads in the 40 to 55 category, for example, which are considered to be in poor condition. Those are the roads that are being milled and overlaid. So their score is, far less than the 80 target overall. So, if you figured out the average PCI of all the roads that go into this chart, it's going to be 80. But the road rehab program is focusing on the ones that are in the 25 to 40 range or the 40 to 55 range. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So we don't actually pave between 70 and 85 necessarily?
Yeah,
As a rule, no.
typically
Okay.
no, yes.
Mr. DiGiulio.
Marty and Trevor, thank you very much for that. We've been doing this for the last, 18, 19 years, and we'd always set the benchmark at 70. And now we're talking about setting the benchmark at 80. Is 80 the new 70, or are we just looking to improve the quality of the roads, which is fine, but is that what we're doing?
Thank you for asking the question. I think it's important while we have Trevor here. He talked a little bit about the ASTM standard as the method for testing. And within those, so I'll let him, prior to 2 cycles ago, the PCI was not prepared in strict accordance with there was a proprietary method that was based upon it. So the scores differed. Okay, the score from those surveys differed from the scores being produced now. And so with that, Trevor, I think you can get far more into the details of that than I can. So.
Right. So I mentioned the ASTM standard. So that's a standardized way of evaluating road condition. We did it using that method 2023, and we also did it using that method in 2020. Prior to that, a different company did the evaluation, and they had a proprietary method that is not standardized. And the exact way they do it is proprietary, so it's not really, the details of it are not public. But I do know, just from being in the same industry, that they evaluate the road surface in some ways similar, in some ways different. They use different equipment to do it. They use different techniques to do it. And in the end, it means that you can't say, well, they're 70, they have 70, and we have 80. Does it mean that the 80 somehow got 10% better? You really can't draw that conclusion because they're not directly comparable, unfortunately.
Ms. Mueller.
So first I want to say this program I think is great because if you drive into another city out of Sandy Springs, you immediately know you're in the other city because of the pavement. What I wanted to ask though was, how do you gather the data? Like, do you use camera? I mean, how do you go? Because that's a lot of miles to cover.
Yes. We use a 360-degree camera. So it's mounted on the roof of a data collection vehicle. And as the vehicle goes down the road, it captures frames at 30-foot intervals. And each frame is is geotagged, so it has an XY coordinate. Long story short, we can take all those images and back to the office, and we know the location of each image, and we can do a analysis of those images for each road segment. So it's based off of the imagery.
You know, the top surface of a road, those photographs will tell you a lot, but they don't tell you everything. Doesn't tell you what's going on underneath in some cases. You may have pavement that's preparing to fail because the subbase is weakened or deteriorating, whereas the surface still looks pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
How do you assess the layer cake that a paved road is?
That's a good question. So our assessment is surface evaluation. So there's no coring, and there's also testing that can be done, strength testing basically, where a weight gets dropped on a road, and you can measure the response of it, and from that you can draw some conclusions about the strength of the road. So we don't do that testing. We adhere to the ASTM standard, but there are distresses that are indicative of a structural problem, and I alluded to that actually in the when I went through the slides. Alligator cracking is an example. Certain types of cracks and cracks patterns indicate that there may be an underlying structural problem. And if you remember that piece, the picture on Hammond that had that bad alligator cracking, that's an example. So we do get it indirectly that way. You know, and the other thing, honestly, that comes into play is that kind of testing is expensive. To do deflection testing on the whole road network to try to find those spots is expensive, and typically it's done maybe one test per block. And the problem with that is there's no guarantee that that test location is going to be representative of the strength of that whole piece of road. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's really hard to tell. In my opinion, the deflection testing is good for when a road has been identified as requiring some form of rehabilitation. You might do strength testing then at a much tighter interval and in every lane to figure out where all the weak spots are. And, you know, it may be from, you know, point A to 100 feet past point A. That piece needs to be dug out and, you know, the base material replaced, but the rest of it may be okay for just mill and overlay. That's where that kind of testing, in my view, is most useful.
And ground penetrating radar, would that be?
GPR, again, it could be useful in that case too, where you've already decided that a road needs some form of rehabilitation, but you're going to kind of fine tune exactly what's going to be done. So GPR will give you how the asphalt thickness varies, if it does, over the length of a road. And it needs to be calibrated by coring and some other things. So that information can be useful also at the project level. I'm not sure how useful it really is at the network level, which is this type of study that we've done.
So you feel that we can make a determination of the total condition of the road just by the surface cracking and the photographs that your system's taking?
Yes, I would say so. You know, I will say that there may be instances where, like I said, where a road, it's been determined that something needs to be done, but you're not quite sure what that something should be. Then I think some of this other testing is appropriate. But for the network level evaluation that we're doing, to provide a relative indicator of condition so that a road rehabilitation program can be pieced together, yes, I think it's sufficient. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Baumann.
Just briefly, because I don't want to I think we've had a lot of questions. I don't want to beat this to death. Are we headed in a direction, though, where we can be predictive with this? Obviously, this seems like this setup is very much reactive. I see, I decide. I see, I score, I decide. Will experience with potholes or other factors, weather, all sorts of data, maybe this is an eating question down the road, are we going to be able to get into somewhat of a predictive model where the inputs over the course of several years could help further guide our decisions on where to invest?
So I think there's two answers to that. One is, we've assessed the condition of the road network twice. So we've got a data point, 2 data points for each piece of road. So, we are getting to the point where we can develop some predictive curves and predict future PCIs based on actual data that we've collected. And that could be done on a road-by-road basis. So yes, and we can identify trends where if certain roads are deteriorating more quickly than we think they maybe ought to or should, certainly the next time we did it, when we have 3 data points, I think we'd be able to start drawing some conclusions like that. Potholes, though, unfortunately, it's impossible to really predict when and where a pothole is going to pop up. It's very dependent on weather events, a slightly weakened area in the asphalt surface itself. I don't think there's any way to really effectively predict, that a pothole is going to occur on, this road this spring. That, unfortunately, I think is a reactive thing and probably will be for a while yet.
All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our work session. I would like to call this meeting of the Sandy Springs City Council to order for Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. Will the city clerk please make the announcements and call the roll?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just a reminder to everybody in attendance, please silence all cell phones and electronic devices at this time. Individuals who would like to provide public comment at a city council meeting are required to complete and submit a public comment card in advance of the meetings. Public comment cards are available online at the chamber entrance. Those providing public comment may be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak on their single chosen topic. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Rusty Paul.
Present.
Councilmember John Paulson.
Here.
Councilmember Melody Kelly. Absent, Councilmember Melissa Mueller.
Here.
Councilmember Jody Rochelle. Councilmember Tibby DiGiulio. Councilmember Andy Bauman.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, have we received any public comment cards?
Yes, we've received one this evening from Bill Griffith, who is in-house tonight.
Mr. Griffith.
Mr. Mayor and council members, thank you for letting me take your time. I want to talk a little bit about this Roberts Drive side path. When I first looked at this, one of the very first things that jumped out at me was $16 million. I'll talk about that in a minute. Another thing that jumped out at me was $200,000 for this study. The goals that were mentioned earlier, increase access to the national park area. Folks, I'm not aware of any problem right now with access to the national park area. Another goal, fill the gaps in the active transportation on Roberts Drive. I agree with that. There are some gaps in the sidewalks on Roberts Drive that probably would be nice to fill them in. So I agree with that goal. The third goal, improve multimodal safety by providing safe walking and biking routes. I've lived on Roberts Drive a long, long time. I'm on Roberts Drive as a pedestrian every single day. I use those sidewalks at least 4 times a week. Widening those sidewalks is not going to solve the safety issue, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Mr. Griffith, you've got 1 minute.
Oh, me. Well, all right. Phase 1. Phase 1 has got sidewalks the entire way. There's no reason to spend money on more sidewalks. Phase 2 has got sidewalks about half of the way. The gaps need to be filled in. I agree with that. 40 seconds. That's amazing. You know, the city had somebody stand up here for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and read through something that was already presented to you in writing, and I get, 3.5 minutes maybe? Listen, what needs to happen is somehow the other Roberts Drive needs to be safer from the motor vehicles. The best way to do that is to get police out there with radar and or maybe put in speed humps. Widening this road for a bike path just doesn't make sense at all. Thanks for your 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Any others? No. All right, we'll close the public comment period. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. DiGiulio.
I move approval of the meeting agenda for the regular meeting of Tuesday, May 21st, 2024.
We have a motion by Mr. DiGiulio. Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Mr. Paulson, that we approve the meeting agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on the approval of the meeting agenda. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The meeting agenda is approved. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mayor Paul,
Ms. Rochelle.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for Tuesday, May 21st.
Ms. Rochelle moves the approval of the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Rochelle, seconded by Ms. Mueller, that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on approval of the consent agenda. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Moving to presentations, will the clerk please read the first item?
This is agenda item number 2024-119. It's a proclamation for the 15th anniversary of the Guardian Angels, presented by Mayor Paul.
We have some folks here tonight that we are just delighted about their community service mindedness, and I'm going to ask all the representatives of the Guardian Angels to come to the podium while I read the proclamation. Whereas in May 2009, the Guardian Angels was formed as a weekly Glen Ridge Hammond neighborhood volunteer group to enhance community cohesion and beautification. And whereas volunteers work for 1 hour on Saturday mornings to help neighbors in need of assistance with yard work, such as raking leaves for someone who has been sick, trimming hedges, and general lawn maintenance. And whereas in the process, the Guardian Angels have helped their neighbors, saved valuable trees through the removal of invasive English ivy, thereby improving the overall look of the neighborhood. And whereas when help is not requested, the Guardian Angels find other areas within the neighborhood in need of maintenance and beautification, such as removing debris from curbs and sewer grates or picking up litter along Hammond Road. And whereas the Guardian Angels believe that an attractive and well-maintained neighborhood with strong sense of community increases property values and is an asset to the city of Sandy Springs. And whereas the city of Sandy Springs commends and congratulates the Guardian Angels on its 15th anniversary. Now, therefore, I, Russell K. Paul, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Sandy Springs, and on behalf of the city council, acknowledge May 21, 24 as Guardian Angels Day in Sandy Springs, given under my hand and the seal of the city of Sandy Springs on this, the 21st day of May, 2024. Mr. DiGiulio, if you'll come with me, since they all live in your district.
Actually, we're in Melissa too.
Yes, and never came back. Because of how hard they worked.
All right, make sure your good side's pointed toward the
Come
camera.
here, let's go over here. Come here, Thea. Let me stand next to Thea.
Yes.
Come on, get in front of her here. Come on, spit your cap. Yeah, I'll talk to her. Come on, get in front of her.
1, 2, 3. All right, good.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank
Thank you. Hey, Bob, how you doing? Good to see you. Welcome back to Sandy Springs. Take care.
Now, I got to say something, don't I?
Sure, go ahead.
Karen,
Very
you wanna
quickly.
Make it quick?
Be quick. You have
The other presentation was riveting. I just want to thank for this group for persevering. I worked with them. They called me their benevolent dictator for 9 years. After I left, Karen took over, and they've persevered another 6 years. I'm very, very proud of them. And thank you, Tibby and Mayor Paul and Dan Coffer, for enabling this to happen. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for all you're doing. Keep it up. All right, clerk, if you read the next item.
Yes, this is agenda item number 2024-120. It's a proclamation in recognition of May 19th through 2024 EMS Week, presented by Mayor Rusty Paul.
All right, a proclamation, whereas the members, and by the way, all the EMS and ambulance and responders that are here to receive this proclamation, if you'll come up to the podium, and while I read the proclamation. Whereas the members of American Medical Response, AMR, North Fulton Operations are ready to provide life-saving care to the citizens, visitors, and workers of the city of Sandy Springs 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Whereas in 2023, the members of AMR North Fulton Operations responded to over 33,000 calls for service in North Fulton County, with 11,900 calls in the city of Sandy Springs. And whereas the North Fulton Operations employs approximately 126 emergency medical technicians, paramedics, and other support personnel for the citizens of North Fulton County. And whereas the members of AMR North Fulton Operations implemented enhanced services such as the Nurse Navigation Program, quick response vehicles, and revised deployment models to improve response times and services. And whereas the AMR North Fulton Operations initiated an EMS Earn While You Learn program to get young men and women into the medical field. And whereas North Fulton Operations hosted the Community Safety Program to bring health and safety awareness to the citizens of Sandy Springs. Whereas the North Fulton Operations participated in over 20 community job and health fairs, career days, and other charitable events in Sandy Springs and other cities in North Fulton in 2023. Now, therefore, I, Rusty Paul, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Sandy Springs and on behalf of the city council, do hereby proclaim the week of May 19th through 25th as Emergency Medical Services Week and the 50th anniversary of EMS Week. The theme is honoring our past, forging our future. I encourage the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities given under my hand and the seal of the city of Sandy Springs on this, the 21st day of May, 2024. Thank you for all you do for our community. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Moving to public hearings, will the clerk please read the first item?
Agenda item number 2024-121. This is TA 24-0002. Consideration of an amendment to the Code of Ordinances, Sections 105 through 119, state minimum standards adopted. This evening's presentation will be made by Jesus Davila. He's Manager of Building and Land Development with our Community Development Department.
Mr. Davila.
Good evening, Mayor Paul. Good evening, members of the council. Before you is a text amendment, and just a brief history of what's going on here is the The city, like most developments, most municipalities throughout the state, are a member and actually abide by the Department of Community Affairs and the minimum building requirements therein adopted annually. In addition to that, we are part of the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District, which is additional scrutiny as it comes to water efficiency, the reason why we're before you. They have an additional layer of plumbing efficiency requirements, and therefore, this text amendment is presented before you because in order to be in compliance with the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District, we are required to present before the mayor and the city council this amendment. Do you all have any questions?
All right, any questions? Well, let's,
It means we have to be more efficient with the water uses throughout our entire municipality. It's a higher level of water efficiency standards, more than what the initial building code requires. That is correct, Mr. Paulson, in very general terms. Yes, sir.
all right, you've heard the report of the manager of building and land management. What's the desire of council? Mr. Paulson.
There we go. Adoption of Agenda Item 2024-121, consideration of an amendment to the City Code of Ordinances, Section 105-19, state minimum standards adopted by the city.
You have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Ms. Rochelle, that we approve Agenda Item 2024-121, amendment to the City Code of Ordinances, Section 105 through 19, state minimum standards adopted. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on Agenda Item 2024-121, an amendment to the City Code of Ordinances, Section 105 through 19, state minimum standards adopted. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
This is agenda item number 2024-122, consideration of resolution to approve a memorandum of agreement by and between the City of Sandy Springs and the Fulton County Soil and Water Conservation District, Georgia, and to authorize the mayor to execute the agreement. This is presented by Jesus Davila, Manager of Building and Land Development.
Mr. Davila, you're doing well tonight. Keep going.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time. Thank you all for being here and being so attentive to these issues. Plain and simple for this amendment, what we're talking about here is not an amendment, forgive me. It is a memorandum of agreement between the city and the Fulton County Soil and Water Conservation Commission as administered through EPD. The request here, previous agreement, actually would require any city projects to be reviewed by the district, in this case being the Fulton County Soil and Water Conservation District. What the city has done in coordination with the district is reevaluate our standards, looking at the higher level of plan reviews and recommendation standards that we have for development projects that are city projects. And then in that respect, it has been agreed upon between both us and the district that the city does meet the standards of the district and therefore does not need to present any plans to the district. We're able, capable, and technically proficient to be able to accomplish our own projects with a very heightened level of professionalism and, again, expertise. So therefore, we are asking to modify that agreement to therefore exclude those projects from having to go to the district. We will still continue to report projects to the district on a bi-monthly basis, but beyond that, we are presenting to you an amended agreement between us and the Fulton County District. Any
All right,
questions?
you've heard the report of the manager of building and land development. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move approval of Agenda Item 2024-122, resolution approving an MOA between the City of Sandy Springs and Fulton County Soil and Water Conservation District, Georgia, and to authorize the mayor to execute the agreement.
You have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio, that we approve Agenda Item 2024-122, a resolution approving a memorandum of agreement by and between the City of Sandy Springs and Fulton County Soil and Water Conservation District. Any discussion?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
So are we doing their work for them? Because if we're doing their work, we should be charging them for doing their work instead of...
So, a very brief history. In years past, there were projects that the district required us to present to them in order for them to review and make sure that we are in compliant with state ordinance. Since that time, the city has proven, again, at bi-monthly meetings and various meetings with the district itself, that we are more than capable, more than knowledgeable to be able to, again, process, review, and critique our own projects based on our ordinances. Our ordinance meet, or if not exceed in some instances, the state minimum standards for erosion sediment control. So what
Mr.
we're doing
Davila,
here is we're saying...
If I could maybe summarize this, rather than us doing their work, they're removing a layer of bureaucracy between our staff and what has to be
That's
done.
what it sounds like. Just thought I would ask. I got it.
Thank you, Mayor Paul.
Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 24-122, a resolution approving a memorandum of agreement by and between the City of Sandy Springs and Fulton County Soil and Water Conservation District, Georgia, and authorizing the mayor to execute the agreement. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will read the next item.
Thank you for your time.
Agenda item number 2024-123, consideration to approve a contract award to FS Scarborough LLC for construction services for the City of Sandy Springs portion of the Path 400 multi-use trail extension project, and to authorize the city manager to execute the contract, presented by Alan Johnson, T-Splosh Unit Manager.
Mr. Johnson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As stated, we are here this evening for your consideration to award a contract to FS Scarborough for construction services for the portion of Path 400 in Sandy Springs. This will be subject to approval by the Georgia Department of Transportation. As you may recall, Path 400 is a 5.2 mile path that starts in the Morningside neighborhood, and as we complete our construction, we'll take it all the way to the 285-400 path that was built as part of the Transform 285-400 project. The section that we will construct is about 1.8 miles out of the 2.3 that was designed with partnership with the City of Atlanta. So the proposed project, because of funding constraints, we could not build all the sections. And actually, can we look at the project map that's included with this? There you go. So the segments we designed in conjunction with Atlanta, the segment from Loredens all the way to 285-400, where you see this is from the concept report. But because of funding constraints, we were only able to build segments 1 and 3. So segment 1 and the green segment is constructed by Atlanta from Loredens up to Nancy Creek. Segment 1 and segment 3 are what we put out to bid. Segment 1 goes from Loredens or Nancy Creek up to Windsor, and then from Ridgeview Middle School up to the 285-400. So that is segment 3. So on January 31st, 2024, bids for segment 1 and 3 were advertised. We had a pre-bid meeting on February 29th, and on April 12th, we received 5 bids, and the lowest responsible bidder was FS Scarborough in the amount of $20,150,923.94. The construction of this project of 1 and 3 will be funded with a combination of local and federal funds, and the funds are available, and this is spelled out in the project framework agreement. In addition, the city approved an intergovernmental agreement in January with the City of Atlanta, because a section does need to be constructed by our contractor in Atlanta from where the bridge over Nancy Creek goes, but we'll be reimbursed by Atlanta for the local funds for that. So the city's local construction match is funded with T-Splosh 2021 funds under S2121, and adequate funds are available from all funding sources to award the contract. So with that, are there any questions?
You've heard the report. What's the desire of council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. DiGiulio.
I move approval of item 2024-123, approval of the contract award to FS Scarborough LLC for construction services for the City of Sandy Springs portion of the Path 400 multi-use trail expansion, and to authorize the city manager to execute the contract.
Have a motion by Mr. DiGiulio. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Mr. Baumann, that we approve the agenda item 2024-123, a contract award to FS Scarborough LLC for construction services for the City of Sandy Springs portion of the Path 400 multi-use trail extension project. Any discussion? Mr. DiGiulio.
Al, when is this going to be started, and how long will this take for construction?
The construction is going to be 3 years. We anticipate
3 years?
3 years.
Holy moly.
It's like bridges. There's many walls and bridges, and that was the engineer's estimate of how long it'll take. But we've got a bridge over Nancy Creek, we've got a bridge over the Glen Ridge connector ramps. And we anticipate it'll be in the fall. So basically, we're going to get this approval. I'm going to let GDOT know. They've already seen the bid tabulations. We're going to let GDOT know tomorrow. They've got to approve the construction, give us construction authorization. So next month we'll get that. We'll get a construction agreement, which we have to bring in and approve. So basically, it's going to be sometime in the fall is when we think we'll actually start construction.
Is GDOT contributing financially to this project?
Yes, sir. They're 80%.
80%?
Yes. It's
Okay,
80-20.
good.
Yes, sir.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Bowman.
This is a big deal.
Yes.
This is a big deal, something we've been talking about for years, and it's the kind of transformative project that we should all be very proud of and keep going with it. I do hope we can put some renderings or signage or branding, given the fact that it will be 3 years, that notifies people maybe with a QR code, hey, this is what's coming, because there's a lot of people in the area, and this is, what we do at our very best. So I hope we can put some signage, Dan or Kristen, all of you, Alan, that and maybe with a map or a QR code, but let's shout it out to the world.
Yes, absolutely.
Any other discussion? Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Alan. There we go. Interesting, 5.2 miles, just so expensive, but I understand it's a complicated area. 2 questions. First off, the Scarborough, have they built paths like this before? I assume they're experienced in this, in building of these kinds of paths?
They've done a lot of site work, and so this is probably one of the reasons I think we got some good pricing is because they're kind of getting into the market with this. So they've done a lot of site work, and we've checked the references. They're also GDOT pre-qualified, so they've got a lot of grading and a lot of wall type work. So they do have to do that, and they have been pre-qualified by GDOT, and the references that we checked have all been positive.
Okay, and are people going to be there? And the reason I'm asking, we had a trail project, as you know, that we're working on at the north end that is taking longer and costing us more money, and I want to make sure that we have enough eyes on this so that we don't have a situation like we had there where all of a sudden things costing us way more than we anticipated. So
yes, sir. We're going to have a lot of city staff, and our anticipation is we're requesting a 80-20 split for GDOT pre-qualified CEI work as well. So yes, we'll have someone out there continuously.
That's fantastic. And assuming we vote this in, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow morning at PCID. So, and encourage them to help us with the.
Yes, sir. They've been. They know that we've been working with them in Livable Buckhead. This has been. What's nice about this has been a partnership with the whole area.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Ms. Mueller.
So, Alan, as we go forward and start, we have all these paths and trails we need to build, right? So some are trail related, some are side path related. Is Scarborough, are they prominent? I think Mr. Paulson asked that in this field, but then going forward, it seems like when we've done our construction projects, we see the same type of quality bidders, right? We have Reeves Young and Jacobs Engineering and, a cast of others.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a short list of who are the prominent builders of these things? Because it looks like if you look at our trail plan, if we get really serious about it, it's it'd be nice to have a good partner.
We put the word out. I mean, Astra has built one of the other sections. Vertical Earth, as we know, has built recently everything in Atlanta. And we put the word out. We know, like Archer West, sometimes some of the really big folks, these could be, even though it's $20 million, it may be kind of small for them. But we've put the word out, and we got it on Dodge reports. We're making sure that the word gets out with these folks. And, again, we've heard really good things about FS Scarborough. So we hope that should be good. And, some of the similar folks. And what helped us build all of it was that they seemed motivated. Because if we hadn't, we wouldn't have been able to build as much as we're going to be able to build.
Well, Mr. Johnson, some of the skepticism we have is because we've had contractors fail on just simple sidewalk projects, and they're $4 million under where everybody else is grouped. So that's a red flag.
And as a matter of fact, we saw that too. And so we did work with our engineers and said, what's the potential issue? They saw a potential issue when we looked at it and realized the issue that the engineer had, that the pricing was a little different, was everyone was using that same subcontractor for MSC walls. So that took that away. And then sometimes they'll hide things in some of the general earthwork type thing, and these guys had a better price on that. So we're confident. We have done some extra, especially for GDOT type works, checking references and everything, and it's all panned out.
Ms. Mueller, I'm sorry if I cut you off.
No, that was,
Okay.
no, actually, it's kind of where I was going.
Okay, all right.
But
Any
no,
further-
we saw the same grouping and everything, and so we did do some more due diligence
I
on
mean,
this.
if they do it for that, that's great. That's $4 million savings, so compared to everybody else. So more power to them. All right, you've heard the report, and I'll call the question if there's no further discussion. All in favor of the motion? All in favor of the motion to approve 2024-123, the contract award to FS Scarborough LLC for construction services for the City of Sandy Springs portion of the Path 400 multi-use trail extension. Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Thank you.
Excuse me, agenda item number 2024-124. This is consideration and approval of an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the City of Sandy Springs FYE 2024 budget for the purposes of allocating funding for the creation of a real-time crime center. This is presented by SSPD Major Dan Nabel.
Major Nabel.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity, and we appreciate your support on our new building. The background on this is that, as you recall, when we were building or working on this project, the real-time crime center was to be paid for separately from the budget for the general construction of the building. And so we would like to propose a budget amendment for that. The total cost of the real-time crime center is $776,771. And the police department proposes to utilize, and I'm sorry, but there is a typo on the memo there where it says 600,000. It should say 610,000. And Ms. Carlisle, I confirmed that with her earlier. From the seized funds account for the majority of that expense. The problem is, since we began this project, the technology and whatnot, the expenses have increased a little bit. So we didn't have quite enough money in our seized funds that we could use for that. So we're asking for the remainder of the funding, which would be $166,771 to be provided by the city. And we will, in the future, seek some sources, grants, et cetera, for some reimbursement of those funds. It's necessary, we believe, to have this real-time crime center so that we continue to provide the high level of police services that the community has come to expect. As a reminder, functions of the real-time crime center are things like helping the detectives identifying suspects, locating vehicle crashes, determining at-fault drivers, ensuring that our mapping systems are correct. When somebody dials 911, we know where they are and where to go. Providing crime trends, things like that, whether it be to officers who are working on crime prevention or maybe to the citizens who are asking about these things in their neighborhoods. Other things that are doing now and can come in the future, utilizing technologies to analyze cell phones and other electronic devices for evidence and data that help us. We can do background checks on suspects, social media investigations, threat assessments. It's a good way to help other agencies because, as you well know, the metro Atlanta area, it consists of numerous different police agencies. This will also allow us to work together with them in a better way. And then the future, which is not in my memo, but the future thought process, the long-term vision, would include creating a new unit with a full-time staff to work in this real-time crime center, and with the ultimate goal of providing some sort of support from the criminal investigations unit to all these calls for service when they come in, at the point that they come in. For example, if somebody dials 911 and says, my business has been robbed, to have somebody available to use these other technological tools that we have to assist the officers in the field for that, and then to create better relationships and integrations with other RTCs that are being built in the area. For example, Cobb County has one that they've just built. Dunwoody is working on one. Atlanta has one. And we want to work together with them. I have some real-world examples that we have used some of this technology before, if you'd like to hear them, or I can entertain questions if you have them.
All right, you've heard the report of the Major. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move approval of Agenda Item 2024-124, an ordinance authorizing the amendment to the City of Sandy Springs budget for the purpose of allocating funding for the creation of a real-time crime center.
Motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio, that we approve Agenda Item 2024-124, an ordinance authorizing an amendment to the City of Sandy Springs FY 2024 budget for the purpose of allocating funds for the creation of a real-time crime center. Any discussion?
Mayor
Mr.
Paul.
Paulson.
Thank you. Thank you. And, Major, this is pretty interesting. And the name Real-Time Crime Center means that if something's in progress, this unit could potentially help the situation that's happening.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so let's go back to the thing that just occurred to me. We're already building the police headquarters. Now we're 6 months into this thing. Now you're adding this to it. Obviously, you've coordinated with a contractor, whatever needs you need for this, he can facilitate in the new building, so we're not having to redo stuff.
Yes, sir, that's already been taken into account. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting just yesterday with Richard Collins and others to make sure that for our proposed real-time crime center that we have the blocking in the walls and the electrical and all of that.
Okay.
So that whether we pray, of course, that you'll approve it today, but if it were to get approved later, we're already in place. We don't have to do any retrofitting, nothing like that.
Okay. That's great. And then, I guess, with the mayor's indulgence, can you give us one example of a real-time crime center actually working?
Sure. So Jason McCabe, if you haven't met him before, he does a great job as the manager over there, and he sent me a couple of examples. One that he sent was a bank robbery of a Wells Fargo. The suspects left the bank with the money that contained the tracker. There is a tracking location technology that we cooperate with the banks. We also use the Flock license plate readers and Genetec cameras. And literally right after this robbery occurred, those CIU officers were able to identify a suspect vehicle. They were able to figure out that they had, the suspects had put a different license plate on this vehicle, I suppose in an effort to conceal the identity of the vehicle. They tracked the vehicle in real time to a parking lot. They watched the occupants exit, go to the rear of the vehicle, swap the license plate again. They continued to track the suspect vehicle as it left the parking lot. They were able to tell the officers in the field what the new license plate number was on the same vehicle. They located and apprehended the subjects. CIU, that's Criminal Investigation Unit, live streamed some dash cam video, and they were able to identify the passenger of the suspect vehicle as the same male that appeared in the bank surveillance photos. So they were able to accomplish that all
That's sweet.
right there with technology.
Fantastic. That's a great example. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Questions on Agenda Item 2024-124, approval of an ordinance authorizing amendment to the City of Sandy Springs FY24 budget for the purpose of allocating funding for the real-time crime center. Excuse me. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2024-125, consideration to approve a contract award to Utilicom Supplies Associates, LLC, for the procurement of hardware and software for the new real-time crime center, and to authorize the city manager to execute the contract, presented by Major Dan Nabel.
Mr. Nabel, you're still up.
Thank you, sir. We recommend that council consider awarding the contract for what we just discussed to Utilicom Supply Associates so that they might procure hardware and software necessary for the establishment of this real-time crime center. They've been identified as a preferred state contractor and have previously collaborated with the city on other projects, including our Emergency Operations Center here at City Hall, the Traffic Management Center here at City Hall, and they've demonstrated a thorough understanding of our requirements, and they've presented a tailored solution for us. We did several pricing evaluations. I also made several calls to other agencies around the Southeast who have used Utilicom and their subcontractor, a company called Constant Technologies. Every single agency that I spoke to, glowing reports of the professionalism of the installers, the ability to understand how the equipment works. Anytime no one had any serious repairs that need to be made or whatnot, but anytime they had an issue, the service was right there to help out the people with whatever issue that they had. So we believe awarding the contract to Utilicom Supply Associates will ensure a seamless integration, efficient project implementation, and ongoing support for the maintenance services.
All right, you've heard the report of the Major. What's the desire of council? Mr. DiGiulio.
I move approval of item 2024-125, approve a contract award to Utilicom Supply Associates LLC for the procurement of hardware and software for the new real-time crime center, and to authorize the city manager to execute the contract.
You have a motion by Mr. DiGiulio. Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Mr. Baumann, that we approve agenda item 2024-125, a contract award to Utilicom Supply Associates for procurement of hardware and software for the new real-time crime center. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Ms. Rochelle.
Are you beginning the equipment now, or are you waiting until the new building is complete?
It will be sometime along the way. It won't be right away, but as soon as the contractor tells the Utilicom and their subs that the contract's been awarded and everything, whatever the contractor tells them when they're ready in the process is when we'll do it. So that in next April or May, whenever the building is finished, that will be up and ready to go. There won't be any delay.
Will the equipment be antiquated by then? Because things, the software, is it constantly being updated?
No, ma'am, and we ask that because it's a valid question. As we all know, 6 months, it's something new coming along. We've done two things. One is the recommendation for the money that we're spending is the current top of the line, without going crazy and buying things that we don't need, but it's the current top of the line technology. And we've also having the contractor build in to some blocking and things on the wall, some ability to expand if we need to expand, and then the way that the electronics are configured, it will be very easy to swap out if we ever need to swap out or anything like that.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on agenda item 2024-125, approving a contract award to Utilicom Supply Associates for procurement of hardware and software for the new real-time crime center. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2024-126. This is consideration of a resolution to authorize award of contract and task order in connection with the city's solicitation for general government services, that's call center services, presented by Interim Communications Director Dan Coffer.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The City of Sandy Springs issued a request for proposal for call center services on February 28, 2004. The purpose of the RFP was to solicit proposals for delivery of call center services to the city's residents and stakeholders. Bid proposals were due on April 3, 2024. The city received 25 proposals. Upon examination for compliance with the solicitation submittal instructions, 13 were found to be non-responsive. Detailed compliance issues were documented, and the responsive offerers were notified accordingly. Proposals were evaluated by an evaluation committee. The committee was divided into 3 separate evaluation teams to correspond with the following basic areas of evaluation with the proposal volumes. The first one was capabilities and approaches. Second was performance confidence. And third was cost and price. What I do need to, I think is important to add as part of this, under capabilities and approaches, the city's standard is linked to the city's most established important requirements, which are 1, accountability, responsiveness, transparency, continuity, and capability. staff committee valued each offeror's proposal according to the above criteria and determined that 2 firms submitted proposals that were technically acceptable and satisfactory or higher under the performance confidence analysis. The proposal submitted by 22nd Century Technology, was determined to be technically acceptable and received performance confidence score of satisfactory. And the proposal submitted by Fanwell, who is the current incumbent since 2014, was determined to be technically acceptable with a performance confidence of substantial. 22nd Century Technologies submitted a lower price estimate. However, pursuant to the best value approach, if the lowest proposal is both technically acceptable and is judged to have a performance confidence assessment of satisfactory or lower, the SSET will base its recommendation on integrated best value assessment of performance confidence and cost price. The data provided in its proposal, as well as the information in the interview, the evaluation committee determined that 22nd Century cost price proposal does not appear to be realistic or reasonable. Fanwell has successfully provided services to the city of Sandy Springs since 2013 and received a substantial confidence rating. The city is not required to provide ongoing training to call takers. They consistently meet its contractual requirements. As a matter of fact, a lot of folks don't realize that Fanwell is located in Orlando, Florida. A lot of people ask me, where is your call center? Where in City Hall is your call center? I'm like, well, they're not here. They're in Orlando, and that's how good a job they've been doing for the last 10 years. The city is, this cost price evaluation determined that Fanwell's proposal is in line with the city's contract, adding a 3% annual escalator for the current contract value. The Fanwell proposal includes a 5% annual escalator for years 1 and 2, and a 4% escalators for years 3 and 4 of the contract. Using evaluation procedure and evaluation methodology, the evaluation committee submits the following recommendation to you this evening. Award a contract to provide call center services to Fanwell, and award Fanwell the base year order beginning July 1st, 2014, in the amount of $637,000. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
You've heard the report of the interim communications director. What's the desire of council? Ms. Rochelle.
I move that we approve agenda item 2024-126, a resolution to authorize award of contract and task order in connection with the city's solicitation for general government services.
Have a motion by Ms. Rochelle. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Rochelle, seconded by Ms. Mueller, that we approve agenda item 2024-126, a resolution authorizing award of contract and task order in connection with the city's solicitation of general government services. Any discussion? Mr. Baumann.
Dan,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Catch a breath. That was a big presentation. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
So this is the flip side, right? We had a matter earlier that raised red flags because it was $4 million below, and now we're being asked to approve not the low bidder, but a higher bidder here.
Correct.
So this also would raise a red flag. Now, I want us to just sort of grapple with that. Fortunately, we've had experience with Faneuil.
Right.
And we, as council members, are in the loop on this thing. But, how common is this that we would go not with the low bidder on a service-based contract, and just sort of want to note and highlight the fact that what we're doing is, going with a higher cost and trading off what seems to be the quality of this vendor versus the other one, because I don't think I heard you say the other one was unqualified.
We did conduct follow-up interviews
Right.
with 22nd Century Technologies. That's a mouthful. And we believe that they didn't have, first of all, they didn't have startup costs. And startup costs frequently cover the training and hiring of staff. And there's one thing, if you see page 4 of your memo, and I asked this question several times to them regarding staffing. They had the following statement: approximately 50 call center staff members are currently on bench and will be dedicated exclusively to the city's call center project. So we kept on saying, well, what do you mean by on bench? Are they temps? Are they people going to be dedicated? And they never could, or then they never did answer the question. Additionally, the presentation, during the interview, the representatives indicated that they plan to provide one call center manager, one call center lead, and 8, although the written proposal and presentation was unclear. In addition to that, is the cost price proposal shows an annual cost of $65,000 for the call center manager, $57,000 for the call center team lead. The balance of $363,705 would be allocated to costs for the customer service representatives. They indicated their interview the company absorbs the cost of incentives such as cost of living, adjustments, benefits, startup costs based upon the prior contract submitted regarding performance. The evaluation team just felt Fanwell had the better record.
Yeah, so in other words, the numbers just didn't add up.
Right, didn't add up.
And let me understand this, and maybe Dan or Eden. Under this value services process versus straight competitive bidding, I don't know that we have a disqualifying thing, but based on this description, the low bidder really didn't meet qualification standards. And is there a difference with this process? Because that's how I interpret it. In supporting this request to vote to pay a lot more than this other bidder, my interpretation after all that you just said is we got a good one in the current one. This other one's really not qualified. The numbers don't add up. So we don't really have a choice here. This is the right way to go. Do you want to?
The foundation of the discussion is that it's not the law doesn't require the lowest bidder, it requires the lowest, most responsible bidder. And the standard that Dan has outlined is what his committee thoroughly reviewed to see if it was responsible and made a determination that it was not responsible to the price that was presented.
That's right. So while this started out with 25 different bidders, we ended up with a discussion over 2. It kind of feels like that even though there was a discussion over 2, we're really down to 1. And that's sort of where it's at. Is that an accurate assessment, Dan?
It is, and I would point out, and I love saying this to council members, there's a natural and legal bias for incumbents. You get it? Okay, I just make sure everybody got it.
But sometimes people favor term limits.
Maybe so.
Okay.
But that is exactly right, and Dan covered it technically when he talked about the startup costs. When somebody's been there 10 years, it's well accepted that the newcomer has to present how they make the change over. And this particular bid was asked again and again about how that would be accomplished and was unable to supply it.
So we just have continuity.
Yes.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2024-126, approving a resolution authorizing award of contract and task order in connection with the city solicitation of general government services. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. Moving to reports, Mayor and Council, I've got just a few quick items to go through. One, you've heard me report about the task force at the Georgia Municipal Association task force I served on looking at LOST, the local option sales tax, and how that should be done. We completed our work going into the legislative session and continued to work a little bit during the session to update based on legislative reaction. GMA has decided to continue that task force and expand it, and I've been invited to participate. We had our first meeting since our last council meeting, and we're looking at broader issues besides just the LOST. LOST and SDS are still part of that conversation, but the things like I've mentioned before, the flexible local option sales tax, that's required by the county, and there's an interest. The county has to initiate that. And Fulton County is unique as far as the flexible loss penny goes, because City of Atlanta, East Point, College Park, and Hapeville have a municipal option sales tax. In Fulton County, they would be excluded from conversation over the flex penny. So in which case they would not be eligible for it. It would be the other cities if the voters decided that they wanted to lower the property taxes through that method. That complicates things a lot for that particular issue. The other is, we talked about a most, which right now is limited to those 4 cities in the state of Georgia. There's been some conversation about trying to expand that to pay for water. We looked at it for as an option to pay for the stormwater repairs that are growing and need to be paid for rather than having it out of general fund. It might be a source for doing that. Unfortunately, under the current law and based on the conversations with legislators, they're not willing right now they're willing to lower the threshold, but not to the point where Sandy Springs probably would qualify, because it's you got to have treat a certain amount of wastewater to be able to qualify. And even if they lower that threshold, we don't treat any wastewater. Fulton County does that. So those are not options that are available for us right now. It was great while the legislature was doing it. We're still working. The task force is working. We may be bringing some proposals back to the legislature that maybe give us the opportunity to have a conversation in the community about how to use other methods besides property taxes to pay for some of the services that we were talking about when we passed the budget. So I just want to give you an update on that. I've had the opportunity to participate in 2 recent Israel Independence Day celebrations. Mr. Bauman and I were at the Selig Center last night. I was at a local synagogue when they had another one, and it's just, this is a tough time for the folks in Israel and around the world, and it's getting tougher, unfortunately. But I was proud to celebrate with the Consul General the 76th Independence Day for the State of Israel. I know Ms. Mueller, Dr. Kelly, and I attended. I don't know, were you at the SSEF breakfast? No, okay. The Sandy Springs Education Force had their annual breakfast where they honor a lot of people who contribute to the education of our city. No city, no community is great without a great school system. And the Sandy Springs Education Force does a phenomenal job of providing community resources to our public schools. And I'm always delighted to be able to participate in that. And so was glad to be there. Also, I know that the city manager has announced that we have a new city communications director, Carter Long, coming on board. So we'll be welcoming her to the staff very soon. Those are the highlights for me. And Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. A grocery store question today, which, as we all know, happens once in a while. Did the governor sign the bill regarding squatters?
Yes.
Okay, and so there's now state legislation in that regard.
That's correct.
And has it been delineated enough that this can be, our police force can make it effective?
Yes, it's a very well-written bill that targets, that turns this from a civil matter into a criminal matter.
In a short amount of time, if I
right.
recall.
When before the police department was very hamstrung in being able to do anything about it, now because it's a criminal matter, they can act much sooner.
Okay, and it passed.
Yeah, one of the things I forgot, and because my game was so terrible yesterday, I've already pushed it out of my mind, the police department's golf tournament on the benevolence fund. Great turnout, Chief. I hope we raised a lot of money to take care of our first responders who may have the need. I did immediately push it out of my mind because it was one of the worst days of golf I've ever had. So I apologize for forgetting, but I'm trying to develop amnesia when it comes to golf. Anybody else? All right. Any staff reports? All right. I need a motion for an executive session for the purposes of real estate and pending litigation.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move that we suspend regular order and move into executive session for the purposes of real estate and pending litigation.
We have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Been moved by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio, that we suspend regular order and move into executive session for the purposes of real estate and litigation. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on the suspension of regular order. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We are in executive session. There'll be no further business conducted tonight. We will simply go conclude our executive session, return, and adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Was there anything you had to do about missing that public comment?
I'll find out from. There was nobody.
Rocky will tell you.
Yeah, there was
Okay.
nobody. I just ran through it, and I actually